Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
What's up? Welcome in. It's Take Command. You can watch us on the 106.7 The Fan and Team 980 YouTube channels. Of course, you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your audio. Logan spent 10 years in the NFL. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant. You can listen to me on 106.7 The Fan. We are going to do something a little bit different today and this week. Really excited about our pod coming out on Thursday because in addition to a quick preview of the Eagles, which it feels like we just did a couple weeks ago, we are actually going to have Logan take a dive into his 5 favorite prospects in this NFL draft to watch this weekend in the college football playoffs. A little primer for Commanders fan, which will be fun. This week, speaking of the draft, we're going to take a end-of-year look with now 1 game to go at the 2025 draft class for Washington and how the Commanders fared. We did this at the midway point, Logan, a little bit of an interim report, have had much more content and now tape to evaluate since. So I thought it'd be a good time to take inventory on the kids.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, and I think especially because a lot of them playing a little bit more. When we did our first eval at the bye, it was kind of like, we want to see this guy get more reps. And over the last couple of weeks, a lot of the young guys have done some good stuff. So it'll be good to talk about them and just kind of give a state of the union heading into the offseason.
Let's start right at the top of the board with Josh Conerly, who's, as a rookie, just in a vacuum, clearly had an up and down year. There's been some good, there's been some bad, but almost linearly, I would say he has gotten better as the year has gone on. Nothing's ever going to be just building on that previous week in a linear path. But if you look at his second half compared to his first half, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Josh Conerly, man, I just think you've seen a guy who's grown up a lot and understands the NFL game significantly better than he did, again, when we talked about him at the bye. And again, he's had some tough matchups. I do think there are some limitations to his game. When you look at the Philadelphia game specifically, they have kind of these bigger, they have Jaylin Phillips, they have Brandon Graham, these kind of big power rushers. And I don't know if you've seen Josh Conerly in person, Grant, but he's a big man. He's almost 6'6", he's 310 pounds, but he's still is kind of filling his frame out. I think people forget that he's such a young player. And so one of the things that I see with him is just the ability to consistently sit power is kind of up and down, especially against elite pass rushers. And I think that's something he's got to work on. And the other element is kind of that big, powerful inside move, right? Because the way he sets, he has the lateral quickness to take care of it, but just being able to kind of anticipate that pitch by some of these top flight edge rushers, I think is going to be something that comes the more kind of file you put in the CPU. But I think some of those things that I just talked about are things that, everyone's got to work on something. Those are kind of his 2 big ones. But when you watch him specifically in the run game, man, he is playing some really excellent football. And again, you look at the Chicago game, every big run. So Deebo Samuel's reverse, he's at the second level. Bill's big run, he's at the second level, getting after a linebacker, kind of playing basketball on the screen to Deebo Samuel. He's the guy that gets the kick out. And just having that skill set, that athleticism, that's something you're always chasing when you're looking for offensive linemen, is that athleticism. So the fact that he is kind of cultivating this physicality with this athleticism already, I think is really exciting. And I just can't wait to have him kind of in the off season for a year, see if he can put on about 10 pounds. And then I think you're going to have a real, just a real bad dude on the right side of your offensive line there.
What I find interesting about that analysis is I remember when he was drafted, I don't want to say the knock, but the question was from the baby face all the way through, he's got some filling out and some becoming a man to do. And it felt like that was kind of the question going into the year. I guess that wasn't a surprise that he handled some of the strength the way he did, right? That was kind of the expectation in his first year.
No, I think that's 100% right. I think when you look at it, you kind of say even going back to training, I think the thing is with him is the player in training camp is so drastically different than the one we're seeing play each week now. And so these criticisms are they're very slight. I think they're things that he can correct and he will correct because he's shown a student mindset. But I do think the play strength was always something you're a little bit concerned about. At 20, obviously great value at 29, because again, he's got top 15 kind of athleticism in his body. But one of the things you're kind of thinking about is when you go back and you think about his senior role reps, you look at his stuff again against some of the bigger defensive ends he played against in college. It's like the play strength has got to come along, right? But I do think when you're looking at a player who I think is 21 this year, like that's something that is really encouraging. He's still a puppy, still a baby, and he's going to grow into himself. And again, like just the idea of him, the progression that he's undergone this season is really a testament to him and really a testament to the staff. Like he is not the same player he was that we were talking about this summer. And so I just think about him again with another off season. If he can stay healthy, get a little bit bigger, hang out with Chad Englehart quite a bit, and Kavan and all those guys in the weight room, like what does he turn into? It feels like we're still in like, it's like a Pokemon, like this is like stage 1 of what Josh Conerly is going to be. And like whatever iteration 2 and whatever iteration 3 is, it's just something that's really, really exciting to think about.
I think I mentioned this when we did our breakdown at the midway point, but I remember at a practice and training camp watching him early on in the first week being like, oh no, like this is not good. And within a week being back out at practice, he had completely morphed into this like different, more reliable guy. And I think you saw that in the regular season too. Like it does seem like he's a quick learner. He's a really smart guy. He makes adjustments. I think we saw that as the year went on. Looking at some of the data, and none of this is gospel, but I'm going to throw some things at you, and I want to know how you feel about any one of them. PFF grade 59.2 this year overall, which is 61st of 84 tackles. I know you've talked about how finicky their pressure stuff can be because of hurries, but just as a comp, he's given up 43 pressures. Nobody else on the team has given up 21. And a lot of this earlier in the year, I mean, he was facing that murderer's row. So statistically speaking, there's plenty to clean up here. And then the last thing is penalties. Laramie Tunsil, I think, second on the team with 8 penalties. Conerly with 13 and another 4 that got negated. So like 17 called penalties this year is number 1. So some of the data in that regard would suggest it was a struggle at times.
I mean, I'm not saying this has all been sunshine and rainbows for Josh Conerly. And I think you just have to look back at earlier in the year, like against the Giants, against the Packers. The Packers was a brutal game for not only him, but for the entire team. Obviously the Raiders and the Falcons have got some decent pass rushers on there. But I do think, I look at the Seahawks, the Lions, the Dolphins, the Broncos games, like the Vikings games, the Giants game, the second Giants game, and the Cowboys game. And he's playing like good NFL football. And so again, was the beginning of the year tough? Yeah. And it was tough. And I think he would probably tell you the same thing. But I think that's the thing that is so encouraging is like, if he had stayed kind of baseline flat, which again, I've played, you've seen guys that never hit that kind of bump in performance. And you're like, man, this is not good. And I didn't get that from him this year. I saw a guy that was every single week, even in games where he didn't play quote unquote super well, he's doing things in the run game. He's building relationships with his guard. Him and Cosme are playing so much better together. Like there's a lot of reasons to be excited about him. And again, it's unfortunate that he had to kind of go through this trial by fire early in the year, but I think it sets him up, man, for knowing what it takes to be successful at the NFL level. So in terms of guys that I'm excited, like this draft class specifically, I know we're going to talk about them all individually, but of the 5 guys, I think they're all doing pretty well. Like outside of injury and some other things we're going to discuss here in a second. But it's like I think you got a dog in Conerly. I really do, and he's going to grow into himself and become a better player next year, I believe. But Trey Amos, I think, did a lot of really good things early this season. Jaylin Lane, what he done in the return game, and then Bill, those. I mean, just those 4 guys, those feel like cornerstone pieces, and to have them at really big positions of value, I think is also a pretty significant talking point.
Yeah, here's the other thing on Josh Conerly that we got to point out, I think, which is if you look at games and snaps, he is the only guy on the offensive line that started in every game, right? Tunsil, end of the year, gets banged up. Left guard has been a bit of a timeshare, Brandon Coleman, and then Chris Paul came in quarter way through the year. Center, Tyler Biadasz has been banged up. Right guard, Cosme takes over when he comes back from IR. If you look at it, Conerly, 985 snaps this year. No one else has more than 950 or so. That's Tyler Biadasz. So there was a durability to him at, a year one where that's hard, man. I mean, you're learning how to take care of your body and you're getting banged up. Remember, there was a time early this season where he was on the injury report. Like, you're trying to figure out how to navigate all that. So I actually think that's a huge deal for this team. As many injuries as they dealt with, as many guys that missed games, he didn't miss any. I think durability is a skill. Durability is a really important trait. And through 1 year, that gets a really big check mark for him.
No, I think the check mark element of the durability is huge. And also, I keep harping on this point, but just how he learned and he grew, and some of the issues that he had early on are no longer issues for him. And again, I talked about the two things I'd like to see him kind of continue to lock in and continue to work on, which I know he will. But the difference in the player is so stark. And again, you talk about the toughness, you talk about the competitor, talk about the willingness to get better. Like, to me, this feels like a guy in a league, quite honestly, where offensive line development is stunted. To see that development happen so quickly for him, I think is a huge testament to him. And again, they talk about offensive linemen kind of hitting their stride in year 3. Like, that's how long it takes for them to kind of become serviceable starters in some cases. And I think here's a great example of a guy who, at 29 is a little bit of a quote unquote developmental tackle prospect. That's why he's not going in the top 15, and just got better each and every day, like, which is really cool to see. So, like everyone talks about, Will Campbell and Banks from New Orleans, and those guys were a different level of prospect because they were a little bit more polished. And so I think everyone knew who evaluated Josh Conerly that there was going to be a little bit of a developmental arc with him. But I think the way he handled himself from an injury standpoint, the professionalism, the work ethic, which again, Coach Johnson talked a ton about, in terms of working with him. I just think there's a lot of things to be really excited about with this player. And again, was this perfect this year? No, I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not. But I think when you look at the intangible boxes of a guy that's willing to get better, a guy that can play through injury, a guy that's tough and athletic, like, those are all things you want at the position. And I also think you saw an uptick in his play as the year went on, which are all very, very positive heading into 2026.
Well, for me, it's super simple, right? You draft a tackle back end of the first round. At the end of year 1, I want to feel like you've got your franchise right tackle. And on a binary, if I don't feel that way, I don't like the pick. If I feel that way, I'm good. And I feel like they have their franchise right tackle. I'm not concerned that at the end of next year or 2 years from now, they're going, I wonder if there's a position they can move this guy to. Like, this is their long-term right tackle. The trajectory looks like it's going to be a non-issue. I feel really good about that. All right, let's go to the next of the offensive players for Washington. And this is a guy late in the year who has also been in and out of the lineup with some injuries in game. Jaylin Lane, who's returned 2 punts for touchdowns. He also has 16 catches for 225 yards. He's had a rush for 7 yards. He was drafted in the 4th round, 128 overall out of Virginia Tech. He's made a huge impact on special teams. Wide receiver, I got to be honest, based on training camp, I would have thought he would have cracked the rotation more extensively down the stretch here, because he was just like routing dudes up out at camp. I was really blown away by him. And then when the season started, it felt like, kind of unlike Conerly, there was a little bit of either a regression or the league kind of smacked him in the face. How do you feel about Lane coming out of year 1?
Yeah, I think this evaluation is it's kind of tough, honestly, because I do think there was an expectation that he was going to come in and be a spot receiver with kind of as your special teams punt returning starter, which is really valuable in the league. And with a 4th round pick, I think that's exactly where he should have been. But obviously there's the injuries at the receiver spot, and he's thrust into like larger roles. And so I remember at training camp, I thought he was doing a lot of really good stuff, but he's kind of, he's working with the 2s, he's working with the 3s. Like, he's a 4th round pick rookie who's kind of trying to find his way. And so I think obviously in those situations, he did well. I think when you're thrust into being the starting X receiver or the starting Z receiver, the matchups you're drawing are just different, right? And I think one of the things about him coming out of Virginia Tech is, I think he's a skilled route runner. Yeah. Do I think he still needs to grow in that area? Absolutely. The other thing too is, like, he's not the most natural catcher of the football, right? There are things like when you look at receiver, I just started going through receivers last night. And like, one of the things, like, I remember from on my sheet is like, how do they catch the ball? And he fights it a little bit. So again, like, there is a route running nuance that needs to be improved. There's a catching of the football that needs to improve. And I think when you draft him in the 4th round, you kind of hope those things happen over the course of the season, and he kind of develops and finds a larger role in the offense. unfortunately for him, his trajectory in terms of what he was asked to do was kind of flipped. Like he's starting on offense and kind of moonlighting as a returner. And I think as the year went on, he kind of fell more into his natural role as Terry got healthy, as Debo got healthy, as Treylon Burks emerged. Like he got to kind of be himself and like meet a very reasonable expectation, which quite frankly wasn't there at the beginning of the year. So I think, again, in terms of a guy that's going to be your returner for the next 5 years, that's going to develop into a number 3 receiver, I am very high on Jaylin Lane. Like just to see the explosiveness, the professionalism, how he's improved as a returner as the year went on, I think is also something that I would like look to. And so, I think in terms of finding value in the 4th round from an offensive football player on special teams, like he fits the bill 100%. Now it comes down to like, how do you handle the offseason and can you kind of refine some of those skills that we just referenced offensively?
Yeah, I think you said it's complicated at the beginning, but here's why for me is because I'd love to say this is like a home run slam dunk when you draft a punt returner in round 4 that plays some wide receiver, and he made a few plays as a 4th round pick on offense, and he was legitimately excellent as a punt returner with the 2 touchdowns. I mean, they were 8th in punt return average so far this season, and with him returning punts, they're actually considerably higher than that. So I go, okay, that's a significant win of a pick. But because of the injuries and the issues at receiver, there was this opening there to be seized, to be had. There are games like that Dallas game, where Robbie Chosen and street free agents are being signed and running routes. And it's a lot of Chris Moore. And it's like, if he was, you see this occasionally, it's very rare, but this 4th or 5th round receiver just comes out of nowhere and has this monster season. And that opportunity may have been there. But I want to go back to something you just said. Did you say ultimately you think he could be like a wide receiver 3? I mean, do you see him like as a slot guy or like a outside player when you say that?
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see how he develops. I think his skill set's probably more outside. So like, for example, there are certain teams that take their Z and they kind of like Minnesota's a good example of this. Like they'll take Justin Jefferson and bump him into the slot on 3rd down. Like having the ability to run some perimeter stuff, do some stuff from the slot, I think it's going to come to the forefront. Because to me, he's not like this hyper twitchy, 5'10" athlete. He's like long speed, get after it. He's explosive in the short area, obviously, because he's fast. But I just think his skill set's more of a perimeter. His long-term best position is probably on the perimeter, I think. But I think because of the size, people think of him on the inside. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think again, his just the way he's kind of cut, the way he runs, to me feels more like a perimeter guy. But again, we'll see how he develops. There's a lot of time left in his career, and he's going to stick around for a long time because of his return ability. So he'll have time to kind of find a niche somewhere in the offense.
We're working our way through the Commanders' rookie draft class, talking about their first-year players in 2025 on Take Command, Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. Let's get to Jacory Croskey-Merritt, Bill season. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. We have decided to use today's episode, since we already looked back at the Cowboys game late last week, to dive into Washington's draft class here at the end of their rookie seasons. And we're on Jacory Croskey-Merritt now. We're staying with the offense. We'll go to the defense in a moment. Logan, timing is interesting here to talk Bill, because if we did this 3 weeks ago, coming off the shutout at the Vikings when he got 7 carries, I don't know, maybe the trajectory was different. We would have felt a little differently. But 2 of the last 3 games, he's gone for 95 yards. So he's got 3 of those this season. He's coming off of a game with a 72-yard home run that we haven't seen the likes of since Clinton Portis was ripping off a 64-yarder in his first carry with Washington, and Adrian Peterson was going for 90 under Jay Gruden. He is finishing the season very strong. He's now up to 775 yards and a rookie-leading 8 touchdowns as a 7th-round pick, averaging about 5 yards per carry this year.
Yeah, man. It's interesting. Yeah, like I think the time that we're talking about him is very interesting because, again, looks great against the Giants. Obviously has a huge game against the Cowboys. But I think the thing that makes me excited about him, again, much like Josh Conerly, is like there were some issues with his game earlier in the season, right? Like, he's kind of always hunting for a home run. He's not really running with great forward lean. Like how's he seeing it exactly? And so then as the year goes on, obviously Chris Rodriguez kind of steps into a larger role. And then obviously Chris gets nicked up and he gets his opportunity. And when he's kind of taken the opportunity, he's done the things that I think he was struggling with. He's run with a better power, better contact balance. Not that his contact balance is poor, but just kind of that NFL standard, that NFL uptick. And I also think his patience as a runner has also improved, kind of finding those opportunities to hit the home run, but understanding that, hey, on first down, I can't take a 0-yard run. I can't take a negative run. I got to get back to the line of scrimmage. And there are times where you still see that kind of pop up for him. I think the Philadelphia game is a great example where he's trying to bounce some of the perimeter, gets bogged up, he ends up taking a loss. But overall, I think you've seen a guy who's improved. And I think with rookie and young players who are very talented, like Bill is, like Josh Conerly is, like you want to see them progressing. And I think you see a guy who is progressing. And I think that's the one thing about the NFL draft that is such an important reminder. You are not drafting a finished product, right? You are drafting someone who's going to be good in 3 years. And how does that person actualize that? And so you want a bunch of self-starters. You want a bunch of guys that are going to continue to improve. And so I think that's been the really cool thing with some of the guys that we're going to be talking about, Josh Conerly being one, but also Bill, to me, falls in this bucket. Is like, this is not the final version of him. He's going to continue to get better. And that's a really exciting proposition with a guy as athletically gifted and as passionate as Bill.
I think that's well said. Look, he had I'm not going to call it a slump, but he definitely hit a patch in the middle of the season where he was not quite as effective. But I think it's chicken or egg here. Usage also changed. They started literally and figuratively Chris Rodriguez as like their A back, and Bill got in where he fit in. Earlier in the year, it was more Bill to soften them up, so to speak, and then Rodriguez, who would come in as the battering ram. And not coincidentally, again, we could debate the chicken or the egg, which came first. But when he's gotten more carries, he's been a lot more effective. Now, you might say, well, if he was ripping off big runs against Minnesota or Denver, then maybe he would have gotten more than a combined 11 attempts. But here's what I know. I know that I'm going to stick with my analysis from earlier this year, which is when the ball is in his hands, I am more excited as a fan of this team than I've been when the ball is in any running back's hands that they have had in a lot of years. I mean, he is a good player. He can make big plays. He can hit doubles and triples and home runs. If you look at 10-plus yard runs this year, he had 21. Chris Rodriguez had 11. McNichols had 5. If you look at 15-plus yard runs, he had the same number of McNichols and Rodriguez combined with 7. If you look at yards on breakaways, so that's 15-plus, he had 203 of them this year. Now, the 72 recently is doing some heavy lifting, but he's got a club in the bag that other guys don't. It's what I crave. It's speed. It's juice in the open field. He doesn't catch it as much or get asked to do that is like my ideal back, and I don't know how much is left in his game there. I want to talk about that, but he is rounding into a guy that I'm intrigued to see his role grow. Like we're talking about the offseason. What are they going to go get? What do they need to add? There's a real conversation here as to what is Bill and how much runway should they give him as opposed to bringing someone in here to supplant them.
No, I think that's 100% right. And they do have kind of an interesting opportunity in the draft, obviously, with that running back from Notre Dame. Love kind of sitting where he's at. He's generational talent, next Bijan Robinson, all those different things. And, do you want to allocate that resource in the first round to a back? Again, that dude is really twitched up, really explosive. So kind of the perfect Grant Paulsen complement. But to your point, like, do you need to? Can you invest that resource someplace else? And I would argue you probably could because you've seen enough flashes from Bill. I think you've got a great depth rotational piece in Chris Rodriguez who can start and play well if he needs to. So in terms of what you said there with regard to him catching the football, I think he's got more in the bag because he didn't do it a ton at Arizona. Obviously, he only played one game, and New Mexico didn't do it a ton either. But I think at some of at the Shrine Bowl when he was there, you saw his ability to kind of win and catch the football at a high level. So I do think he has the ability to do that. It's just with a young player kind of growing in the offense, growing as a pass protector. Like I think that'll come as again, he matures in that pass protection area.
We did see, I don't know if it was by design or just kind of out of circumstance, but I've been asking for more reps for him, like in shotgun next to the quarterback, in that McNichols role on passing 2 and 4 minute situations. We kind of saw that in the Dallas game. But yeah, look, these guys get to evaluate every day at practice, and they can put them in all these sequences and situations behind the scenes in the bubble or whatever that we don't see. But just based on what we saw, it was pretty limited in terms of looking at some of the numbers. 9 catches for him, 11 targets, did have 0 drops, 68 yards, ended up getting credited for 134 plays as a receiver snap, meaning he's out there, on a passing play, which is actually more than I would have thought, if I'm being honest. But, I'd like to turn that heat up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think some of that is just like the way they've used the back this season is not so much as a dynamic pass catcher. Obviously, when Austin Eckler goes out, that role kind of shifted and no one really took its place. I think you maybe argue Debo's touches kind of supplemented some of that, and McNichols gets some of those touches, but there's not like, hey, we're going to throw a screen to the back like we did when McNichols was in, and we're going to run a choice route to the back like we did when, or not McNichols, when Austin was in, excuse me. So I do think like there is room for that position to grow and evolve in this offense, especially given how much they kind of spread them out. Like I look at obviously how San Fran is using Christian McCaffrey, and I'm not saying he's the same person, but I do think when you have a back that can win one-on-one in the pass game versus a linebacker, it makes the offense significantly more dangerous. So, and I think you have a guy like in watching him move that can exploit some of those matchups. So again, like that's an area that, again, I think they didn't ask him to do this year, but I do think based on his athleticism, his movement skills, that's something he can do. And so like heading into the offseason, like I'd be curious to see if that's something like, we talk about areas where the offense can shift and evolve and grow. And I think like that's a really interesting spot that it could is, can you get the back more involved? Can you find more easy one-on-one matchups as just opposed to them being in a pass protector, which it sounds like Bill was for the majority of the season.
If you're curious how he stacks up against some of the other rookie running backs, Ashton Genty went in the top 10, 888 yards. Travion Henderson of the Patriots, 858 yards. Quinshon Judkins, now hurt with the Browns, 827, and Bill, 776. But only Travion Henderson has averaged more yards per carry than Bill. He's number 2 at 4.8. He's also number 1, as I mentioned, in rushing touchdowns with 8. All of those other guys, Genty, Travion Henderson, Judkins, Monangai, Woody Marks, among the rookie receivers rookie running backs had more receiving yards, more targets, more catches. So that's one area again where I'd like to see the faders turned up for Jacory Croskey-Merritt. Before we move on from him, this is a really hard question to answer because there's a million different ways that they could kind of lay out their assets. But if you were GM going into the offseason, would your first thought be, I'm okay at running back? Like I've got Chris Rodriguez, who's an RFA. I've got Bill. I could roll with those guys, or are you looking to do something a little different there and add something to that room other than maybe your Eckler McNichols replacement if he's not coming back?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that I think, as an analyst that follows this team very, very closely, you get passionate about players. You get passionate about Bill. I get passionate about Chris. Like I just mentioned on the last show, how much I love Chris. But I do think the thing that comes to me is like, you never want to kind of be content. Like you always want it to be a competitive environment. And so I probably would look to add somebody there, right? Whether it's McNichols' replacement, obviously, or someone just to push the young room, right? Someone just as a mentor that brings a professionalism to that room to make sure that the progression that we've seen from Bill, the progression we've seen from Chris continues to be actualized. And so what does that investment look like? I don't really know, but I do expect that they'll make some type of move there to bring somebody in, probably a veteran. I don't think they'll pay him a lot of money or anything like that, just to make sure that the room has some depth and some competition, because I think that's really important to building the best team possible.
Well, if they're not going to pay a lot of money, then some of the names I'm about to say won't matter. But the free agent running backs, it's a bountiful list. I don't know if you've looked at it, but I mean, it's a pretty huge market of legitimate RBs, which generally means you can get a discount down the board somewhere. But some of the pending free agents include Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, Rico Dowdle, Nick Chubb, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, Kenneth Gainwell, who's had a resurgence in Pittsburgh, Raheem Mostert, Kareem Hunt, Alex Madison, A.J. Dillon. You can go on and on and on. So pretty extensive list of free agent running backs if they wanted to just bring in one of those veterans to compete. All right, Logan, let's pivot over to the defensive side. We're breaking down the Washington rookie class here at the end of year one. Here's a sad and frustrating one is Trey Amos, who ends up in week 10 this year, suffering a fractured fibula in the Detroit Lions game, lost for the remainder of the season. Amos was probably my favorite player at training camp. In fact, I remember doing a topic on my show after camp about who had impressed me most, and he was right at the top of my list. I didn't think he flashed as much in the regular season as maybe I had anticipated. Having said that, you can make the case he was every bit as good as any corner they've had at any point this year. What did you see from the second round pick, starting cornerback Trey Amos in what was only a 9.5 or so game sample because of the injury, unfortunately?
Yeah, again, like we talked about Conerly, and obviously Amos is the next pick. What was he, 64, 67, whatever he was, in the second round? And I was just really impressed with him. Obviously, I was impressed with his preseason, but also I was impressed with how he played in the season. Like, talking about leveraging guys a lot, putting them in man coverage situations. And I didn't really feel like he shied away from any of those matchups or any of those moments. I think he's got decent ball skills. I think he had a couple of PBUs, which was great to see. Obviously, he had a tough game in the Dallas game, trying to guard George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb or whatever. But I do think there's a guy that's got the length, got the competitive toughness. We talked a little bit about this the last time we did this. And again, like there's been no new information, but I do kind of wonder about his frame, his strength. Like, can that continue to develop? Because I think you look at some of the top flight guys, the Pat Surtains, the Sauce Gardners, like one of the things they do have is they have tremendous play strength. And so does that continue to develop? But in terms of ball skills, feel, technique, confidence, like all those things you're looking for in a corner, I feel like he's checking a lot of boxes there, which is really encouraging. Now, can he stay healthy? Can he continue to improve? Like, those are the big questions heading into the offseason.
Just to double click on that question you bring up, is that a overall size or frame thing? Like you're saying durability or just matching up against physical receivers? What are you referencing there?
Yeah, it's more matching up against physical receivers. Like in college, he wasn't injury prone as far as I remember based on the evaluation that I did. I just think like when you look at some of the really good guys, there's like this, there's a physicality to them and a dog kind of toughness. And again, I think he's got some toughness to him, but I just want to know if that can continue to improve. And, it'd be really interesting to see him kind of play in this new iteration of the defense where he's a little bit more insulated. He can kind of play with his eyes on the quarterback. Like, do you see more ball production? Do you see more PBUs? Because again, he played at a bunch of different schools. I think he played at 3 different colleges in his time. Like, I think he was at, Alabama. He was at Ole Miss for a little bit. And he's done both. He's played a lot of man coverage. He's played a lot of zone. I think his flexibility is encouraging to me. And again, like I think in his moments, like did some really good stuff. Like I vividly remember that great PBU he had against Kansas City. He had a bunch of good stuff that he did in terms of like making tackles in the run game. So I think he's a ball player. I think, and like you said, like at a position that is, in my opinion, notoriously hard to get right. He seems like a hit, and I just wish he would have played more so that we could continue to flesh out our evaluations, but also to see him continue to develop.
Well, the point I wanted to bring up, and you kind of referenced this, is we also only saw him when the defense was at its absolute worst, when they weren't getting off the field, getting stops, forcing punts, like coverage was kind of a mess, all those things. They clean it up after his injury, not because he's not out there, but after the change, and they start scheming things up differently, playing different amounts of man and zone and asking different things of corners. It would have been interesting to really see him playing with some of that confidence. You see a guy like Sanders still driving on things and breaking up passes. And obviously, he went inside, outside. But that would have been really interesting to me down the stretch, is just to see, we saw Jonathan Jones in phase against Dallas this past week have 2 pass breakups. If that's Amos, what are we saying? And how does that look? And if he's done that 2 or 3 times over the last few weeks, how do we feel? So I think that
great point.
Like how they were playing when he was playing actually makes me appreciate and feel better about him, because not to throw shade at like Marshawn Lattimore or anybody, but I felt better when the ball's in the air. And I know before the camera flips, like, oh, that's his side. I felt better about it than other people's, right? And that was when things were at their absolute worst. I would have loved to have seen him when they got it cleaned up and were coaching it up a little better.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's really tough too, because again, there seemed to be a lot of communication issues in the secondary at that time, and it put guys in difficult spots. But I do think like when it was like, hey, this is my man, it's very clear he knows his responsibilities, like played well. And so, like to your point, it would have been nice to see him kind of down the stretch here, in a defense that seems to be better communicated. Guys are on the same page a little bit more, because that just helps everybody out, as opposed to what they were doing earlier in the season. So again, I think because of when he was playing, because of who he was playing against, because of how he was playing in terms of the leverage, in terms of all the man coverage, I think he kind of, I want to say he played about as good as you could expect a young guy in that situation to play on a defense that was really struggling. And again, like think about the injuries on for the pass rushers, all those different things. So I'm very high on him. And again, like like you said, it is a small sample size. It's hard to know exactly, especially at that position corner, because it's one of those positions that doesn't translate year on year even, nonetheless, like scheme to scheme. But I think he's a guy that is going to be a ball player and showed flashes of how good he could be. Now, it's, the NFL is not for long, right? He's got to continue to work on it and get better and get healthy. But I'm excited about him coming in next year. I think you have a good, solid player on the perimeter in him. What they do with Mikey will be interesting, but I still think you need another corner. Like, do they draft a corner? Do they attack it in free agency? But I do think you have, like, much like the right tackle thing you mentioned with Conerly, like I kind of feel that way about Amos.
Yeah, like a corner 2 outside, like
right.
Long term, he's fine. And I would say is a lock to be a starter next year with Conerly. I don't know that I would say that about anybody else of the 5, which is not a knock as much as just kind of where they're at. But those 2 guys are going to start. You mentioned Sanders still will be interesting. Do they keep him outside and now they have their corners and they spend money on a nickel or bring someone in the draft who plays nickel? Do they get creative and maybe kick Sanders still back inside and then make the boundary an up? Priority again, like those are things they could figure out as they go. All right, then the last guy we've got to talk about, and remember, it was only a 5-player draft class, which was the smallest in the NFL, partially because of deals for Marshawn Lattimore, which to this point hasn't worked out very well, and Laramie Tunsil, which to this point has been a home run who hopefully they extend because he's been a godsend at left tackle. But Kain Medrano, 6th-round pick linebacker at UCLA. Ken Norton Jr., the linebackers coach, had familiarity with him. Medrano has played in 8 games on special teams. He's made 5 tackles. I would say, though, I am stunned that we haven't seen him on defense at all. Not that I would have thought he would have played a bunch, but especially if you would have told me their record and kind of the way the season's gone and some of their issues at linebacker in terms of running, the fact that he hasn't played at all, I think is a little bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things about defense that I think is maybe missed by a lot of people. I'm not saying you're missing this, but like they only usually play 2 linebackers, right? And only recently have they been able to get Jordan McGee on the field in terms of kind of playing more base. And so then it becomes like, who are you going to take off the field to get him on the field? And so then it comes to like Bobby Wagner taking him off the field. And, I'm going to say this, and I've said this other places, like he's been the best defender over the last like 5 weeks of the season. Like he's playing absolutely out of his mind. So like, I don't know if I would feel comfortable taking Bobby off and giving Jordan McGee the green dot. Like I said this earlier, maybe a couple weeks ago, like I feel like Bobby's played well enough where I would definitely consider re-signing him. Like that's how well he's played the last couple of weeks. And so like, I don't know, like where would you put him in? He's a different player than Frankie Louvu. He's kind of.
So for me, what I would do is, and it's just a different philosophy, and I know they're not going to do this. I would have series where I would have Bobby out, and then I would have McGee green dot to evaluate him there. And then I'd have Medrano next to him. I'm not doing it. And it's literally because I'm in evaluation mode for the future. No different than, some of the other conversations that we have.
Sure.
So it would have been, I'm not talking about 50 snaps, but like a preseason game rotation or something where, hey, on this drive, you're going to go play defense next to Jordan McGee. And it's as much about McGee as it is him. But he would have played at some point, I guess, is my point.
No, I understand what you're saying. I also, the other thing too with him, like I'm a big Kain Medrano fan. I loved watching him at UCLA. I think he brings a lot of flexibility. And I think when you look at a guy, we'll see. I don't want to give him too much responsibility in this conversation we're having, but could he be the big nickel in the defense? Maybe. And would that solve a lot of issues for you? Maybe, right? Like if you're kind of saying like if he's the Buffalo player where like he's a linebacker, but also has like some safety coverage skills, like that's really intriguing to me moving into next year. Now, he's got to develop. Like when you watched him at UCLA, he was not a great tackle. He's not overly physical. His movement skills are insane. His ability to track the football is insane. Like he's a converted wide receiver. So like this was going to be more of a developmental guy anyway at this spot. And I think like understanding that is also important here, like in terms of his developmental arc. Like Conerly like was going to play. Amos was going to play. Jaylin Lane had a very clear role. Even Bill had a very clear role on this team when they drafted him. You're like, they needed a back. They needed to get more explosive. Here he is. Kain was the one that was kind of like, he was a depth developmental piece to like the nth degree. Like had a lot to work on personally. It was going to be hard for him to get on the field because of the guys that he had in front of him. So I think that's the other thing I just wanted to kind of bring up. And so again, like this week, if Bobby gets 5 tackles on the first 5 plays of the game and he's at 2,000 and you say, oh, like let's get Bobby out, maybe Kain plays more this game, which would be awesome to see. But I do think like understanding the structure of our defense here, it's really hard to get multiple linebackers on the field because of how much nickel, how much dime they do want to play.
Yeah, I do wonder, too, the idea of, you've talked on this pod a few times, including a couple minutes ago, about possibly bringing Bobby Wagner back, like how much that factors into the conversation, right? Because if they are in a place where they want to get younger and faster and are doing something different, maybe you do prioritize evaluating these kids. But if they are thinking, hey, we've already talked to Bobby, he's interested, we're interested on another 1-year deal or whatever, then you're less inclined to play Jordan McGee at the green dot and to play Kain Medrano to like look at those guys because you've got your answer right there, so to speak. So I'd like to be a fly on the wall to just kind of know what they're thinking, but sometimes the actions kind of tell you what they're thinking, and their actions right now suggest that they're all in on Bobby.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, it's easy to say that, but maybe they really like Kain, but maybe they think he's not quite ready yet, and they feel like they don't need to bring Bobby back, and Jordan can move to the green dot, and then Kain can move to the will, and like that those actions this offseason will inform that at a high level. But we'll see. I do feel like Kain had a long way to go coming to this team, and so is he there yet? I think I'd like to know that, but again, like, we're not at practice every day. We don't get to know that information until OTAs and minicamp. But I do think like that is a really interesting question to kind of see like what that position looks like heading into 2026. And even if they really like him, even if they really like Jordan, I'm still probably bringing in a veteran presence just to kind of guide that room a little bit more over the next year or two. Like even though those guys might be really talented, so it'll be really interesting to see how they handle that. But again, like, it'd be awesome to see Kain play, but maybe they feel like he's not ready. Maybe they feel like Bobby still deserves this opportunity. I kind of inclined to think that second thing in terms of how Bobby's been playing again last 5-6 weeks, but we'll see.
We've talked a lot about that. This is like the ultimate and it's not like over the years of covering the league, I've kind of come to the realization it's just like the way on the outside that as fans or media or whatever, we would like to see it done and think about it is not how it's going to be done in the building. And you just have to deal with that. Like, I think, again, teams should do it this way. They're not going to. This is like the reality of it's a people business. And it's about human beings and egos. And I don't even mean that nefariously, but like taking care of the guys that are putting their bodies on the line and who have taken care of you all year, as opposed to my more fantasy football of like, it is week 17, season is over. It's time to see young player because old player may not be like, that's just not how they operate.
And that's something that I wonder about too. Like if Bobby's not chasing this 2,000 tackle thing, like, does he play in this game? You know what I mean? Like, if he's 5 tackles away, you know what I mean? Like, I want to see him get it this year. I know that they feel strongly about that in the building. Just, I would assume. No one said that to me, but Dan's relationship with him, this is rarefied air. He'd be the 3rd guy in NFL history to get this mark. Like, let the man play. Let him get 5 tackles. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I'd say too to that. Like, there's like, to your point, there's other things around this moment, around this game that, like, while the season's over, like, it's not over for Bobby Wagner in terms of reaching a really cool milestone. So
he needs 62 tackles to become the all-time leading tackler,
which is crazy. Like, that's crazy that he's that close.
It is. Ray Lewis, London Fletcher, Bobby Wagner in that order at this point. I mean, that's why I don't think he's hanging him up, whether it's here or somewhere else. You'd imagine he wants to become the all-time leading tackler. If 2,000 is important to you, and now you're within 60 of Ray Lewis, I mean, why wouldn't you want to go get that record? We're looking at the Commanders draft class. Let's, before we say goodbye, take a quick look at where they draft this year. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. So currently, Washington has the number 7 pick in the NFL draft. They could pick, believe it or not, as high as number 2 still, based on some tie-breaking metrics. Very, very unlikely that they'd get all that help. Most likely, they're going to pick somewhere between 5 and 7. They, unfortunately, though, Logan, will not have many picks unless they trade down. Again, they're slotted to have no pick in the second round, no pick in the fourth round. So they've got the 7th overall pick as of right now, and then a 3rd round pick early on, 71, and then 4 more picks from rounds 5 through 7, 146 and beyond. So it's pretty slim. Only 2 of the first 145 selections are Washington's, which makes things complicated. You're going to hear me say the phrase trade back a whole lot between now and the draft. So after having the lowest pick total last year, Logan, they're projected to have one of the lower totals again this year.
Yeah. And again, like that becomes maybe the most interesting question to me for this offseason is how do you navigate that? Obviously, they have a lot of money, cap money to invest in free agents. But again, they got to re-sign a lot of the pieces. There's only 30 or so guys on the roster at the moment for 2026. So a lot of that money is going to be allocated to bringing new pieces in to kind of fill that out. But the draft thing is interesting because, again, everyone talks about that's the best way to build your team. But how do you do that? How do you make sure you do that? And again, we talked about Adam Peters, like when we just reviewed the draft class, like it seems like 4 of the 5 guys for sure are going to be really big contributors in 2026. Can you do that again? I mean, I would not put it past Adam Peters to do that, but it just seems like it's really hard. Like the draft is notoriously a crapshoot. And so people say, oh, okay, you're picking between 5 and 6, trade out of the spot. And we're going to say this a million times, but you need a dance partner to trade out with, right? And so in a quarterback, so the first position I look at is quarterback, right? And obviously you have the kid from Indiana, and then the kid, Dante Moore from Oregon may return to Oregon. If he goes back to Oregon, do you lose any kind of ability to trade out of that spot?
Well, I think you definitely do. I'd be shocked if he went back to Oregon, though. I mean,
that's the big talking point right now.
Right. That would just be crazy to me if you're going top 3 in the draft and you go back. But yeah, Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, it's a weak quarterback class. And that does hurt them, by the way. And
there's really, and I think the other thing too, that's at least in my preliminary evaluation, like I've only watched probably 10 guys so far, so I'm still working through it. There doesn't seem to be that blue chip player that you want to trade up for, right? That, that really gets your juices going. Doesn't appear to be like the Abdul Carter of the class, right? Where there's a lot of people that have a lot of excitement about a defensive player or an offensive lineman. It's a little bit different in terms of like that top 15 area. Reminds me a little bit of last year too. Like last year where there wasn't like this kind of flashing light, like this is the guy, that everyone's got to take. And it leads to kind of a stock top 10. So if it's going to be a stock top 10, usually it's hard to trade out at 5 or 8 if you're looking to accrue more draft capital.
All right, next time you hear from us for the Thursday episode of Take Command, we're going to give you the things we're hoping to see in the season finale from the Commanders in Philly against the Eagles. Also, speaking of the NFL draft, Logan will put together his list of the top 5 guys you should be watching in this weekend's college football playoff action, which will be pretty cool. So make sure you come on back for that. Thanks for checking us out on Take Command. For producer Evan and Logan, I'm Grant saying so long.